In the heart of the city, where shadows danced along dimly lit streets, lived Lucas, an unassuming man with a quiet demeanor. Yet, beneath his ordinary exterior, something extraordinary was brewing, a whisper that only he could hear. Every night, as Lucas ventured out on his food delivery routes, an indiscernible voice echoed in his mind. Soft at first, like a distant murmur, it gradually grew louder, urging him toward thoughts he had never entertained before. The whispers weren't audible to the world, but they were impossible for Lucas to ignore. They seemed to seep into his thoughts, weaving into the fabric of his consciousness like tendrils of darkness. At times, he found himself lost in contemplation, gazing at the moonlit sky as if searching for answers among the stars. Lucas's sleep became restless, plagued by strange dreams that left him waking in a cold sweat. Visions of power and control danced before his closed eyes, tantalizing him with promises of something beyond the ordinary. He became consumed by an insatiable hunger, an urge to rise above the monotony of his life. But what was the source of these whispers? Were they a manifestation of his inner desires, or something more sinister? Lucas couldn't tell, yet he felt drawn to them, compelled to explore the depths of his newfound thoughts. As the nights passed, Lucas became more introspective, his mind a battleground between the familiar life he knew and the unknown darkness that beckoned. The whispers continued, their presence growing more palpable with each passing night. With furrowed brows and a sense of trepidation, Lucas embarked on a journey within himself, guided by the enigmatic whispers that would ultimately shape his destiny. Little did he know that his steps toward the unknown would lead him down a path from which there was no turning back, a path that would forever alter the course of his life and the lives of those he encountered. The whispers within Lucas's mind grew more insistent, their persistent murmur evolving into a relentless chorus. They invaded his thoughts, twisting his desires into something far darker than he could have ever imagined. Haunted by these newfound urges, Lucas's days were marked by an unsettling restlessness. The visions that once seemed distant became vivid, consuming his waking hours with a hunger for power and control. He couldn't escape the allure of his own desires, even as they led him down a path of moral ambiguity. In his solitary moments, Lucas would find himself drawn to the shadows, as if seeking solace in the embrace of the unseen forces that whispered to him. The barrier between his conscious self and the dark yearnings within him began to blur, leaving him feeling like a passenger in his own body. The insatiable hunger he felt wasn't for food, but for dominion over others, a craving that gnawed at his very soul. The malevolent force that had taken root within him seemed to revel in his torment, stoking the fires of his desires until they consumed him. Lucas's once vibrant eyes took on a haunted quality, his demeanor shifting to one of quiet intensity. The world around him seemed to fade into the background as his obsession with power deepened. It was as though he was in a constant battle with the darkness that had taken hold, a battle he didn't fully understand. He kept his inner struggle hidden from the world, maintaining the facade of normalcy that he had crafted so carefully. But beneath his charming smile, a storm raged, tearing at the edges of his sanity. The visions grew more vivid, more visceral, as if the malevolent force within him was clawing its way to the surface. Haunted by the dichotomy of his desires and the life he once knew, Lucas stood at a crossroads. Would he succumb to the relentless pull of the darkness within, or would he find the strength to resist its temptations? As the whispers grew louder, the choice became more urgent, and the path he chose would determine his fate, a fate intertwined with the very essence of the haunting desires that now consumed him. The city's labyrinthine alleys seemed to mirror the twists and turns of Lucas's internal struggle. It was within these shadowy passages that he encountered an enigmatic figure, one whose presence seemed to resonate with the very whispers that had plagued him. Dressed in garments that seemed to shift and ripple like the darkness itself, the figure exuded an aura of ancient knowledge and power. Eyes that held the weight of ages fixed upon Lucas, as if peering into the depths of his soul. In a voice that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, the figure addressed Lucas by name, confirming his darkest suspicions, that he wasn't alone in this internal battle. The enigmatic stranger spoke of an entity, an ancient malevolent force, that hungered for dominance over both the physical and spiritual realms. With each word, the figure wove a tale of power beyond imagination, of abilities that transcended the boundaries of humanity. Yet, Such power came at a price, a pact that would bind Lucas to the malevolent force, granting him the strength to wield its sinister potential. Lucas hesitated, his heart pounding within his chest. The allure of power tugged at him, mingling with the haunting desires that had already taken root. He could feel the tendrils of darkness curling around his thoughts, threatening to overwhelm him. As if sensing his internal struggle, the figure extended a hand, an invitation to embrace the very darkness that had haunted him. And in that moment, Lucas made a choice that would forever alter the course of his existence. With trembling fingers, he accepted the offer, sealing a pact with the shadows. The enigmatic figure's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and as the pact was sealed, Lucas felt a surge of energy course through him. His mind expanded, his senses heightened, and he could sense the malevolent force coursing through his veins like a torrent of power. In that instant, Lucas's fate was sealed. He had become a vessel, a conduit for an ancient malevolence that hungered for dominance and control. As the enigmatic figure faded into the shadows, Lucas was left standing at the precipice of a new reality, one where his desires and the malevolent force within him were one and the same. The pact had been forged, the die cast. With newfound intelligence and power beyond measure, Lucas's journey into darkness had only just begun. The malevolent presence, now intertwined with his very essence, would shape his every action and decision, driving him toward a destiny that promised both unimaginable heights and unfathomable depths of darkness. With the malevolent force now entwined within him, Lucas's life took on a new, intoxicating rhythm, a dance of deception that masked the darkness that simmered beneath the surface. The charisma he had always possessed now held an otherworldly allure, drawing people to him like moths to a flame. As Lucas continued his daytime routine of food deliveries, he found himself observing the women he encountered in a new light. The malevolent force whispered suggestions, pointing out their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses. It was as if the shadows themselves had become his confidants, guiding him toward his chosen targets. He became adept at identifying those who lived on the fringes of society, those who were isolated, vulnerable, and craving connection. The women who ordered food from him were unsuspecting participants in his macabre game, pawns in a larger scheme that only he could comprehend. With each delivery, Lucas's confidence grew. He wielded his charm like a weapon, manipulating conversations to gain insight into his victims' lives. The whispers guided his words, helping him create an illusion of trust, a trust that would ultimately lead them into his carefully woven web. Behind the facade of a courteous deliveryman, Lucas was a puppet master pulling the strings of his victims' lives. He could sense their fears, their desires, their weaknesses, and he used this knowledge to draw them closer. The malevolent force reveled in his actions, feeding off the emotional turmoil he created. As the nights passed, Lucas's double life deepened. By day, he played his part as an unassuming deliveryman, interacting with customers with a disarming smile. By night, he descended into the shadows, becoming a harbinger of malevolence, a figure that haunted the edges of his victims' nightmares. The malevolent force relished in the psychological torment it wrought. It reveled in the agony of anticipation as his victims grew more entangled in his web of deceit. And as their desperation grew, Lucas could sense their vulnerability reaching a fever pitch, a vulnerability he would exploit to fulfill the dark desires that now consumed him. Lucas's existence had become a tightrope walk between his ordinary life and the extraordinary darkness that had become his reality. With each passing day, the line between the two grew thinner until it was nearly imperceptible. And as he continued to dance his intricate dance of deception, Lucas could only wonder how long he could maintain his facade before the darkness within him consumed him entirely. Beneath the surface of the city's bustling streets, hidden from prying eyes, lay Lucas's chamber of horrors, a grim testament to the depths of his malevolence. The malevolent force within him reveled in the secrecy of his lair, a place where he could unleash his darkest desires without restraint. The basement was a labyrinth of shadows and despair, a chilling reflection of the darkness that had taken root within Lucas. Chains and restraints lined the walls, remnants of torment inflicted upon those unfortunate enough to cross his path. The air was heavy with a palpable sense of dread, as if the very walls held the echoes of past suffering. In the heart of the basement stood a table, a sinister stage where Lucas's malevolent fantasies played out. The table was adorned with an array of instruments, each more gruesome than the last. Blades, restraints, and implements of pain gleamed in the dim light, waiting to be wielded by their malevolent master. Lucas's victims were led to this chamber of horrors, lured by his calculated charm. Once inside, they were subjected to his sadistic whims, their pain and suffering broadcasted to a dark corner of the internet, a corner where twisted souls bid for the opportunity to determine their gruesome fate. The malevolent force reveled in the agony, feeding off the pain and suffering it had incited. As Lucas carried out his torment, he could feel the malevolent presence surging within him, amplifying his dark desires and driving him to even greater depths of depravity. His victims, trapped and helpless, became mere playthings for his malevolent whims. Their screams echoed through the cold, damp basement, a symphony of suffering that resonated with the malevolent force within him. Lucas's own humanity became a distant memory, overshadowed by the insatiable hunger for dominance that now ruled him. Yet, amidst the torment and despair, glimmers of resistance began to emerge. Some of his victims, despite their fear, found within themselves a spark of resilience, a spark that ignited their determination to survive. In the darkest of moments, a faint glimmer of hope began to pierce through the suffocating darkness. As the malevolent force reveled in the pain it had sown, it remained unaware that it was sowing the seeds of its own downfall. The victims, united by their shared suffering, would form an alliance against the darkness that bound them. And in the depths of the basement's secret chamber, a quiet rebellion began to stir, a rebellion that would set in motion a chain of events that neither Lucas nor the malevolent force could have anticipated. The malevolent force's grip on Lucas tightened, its hold unrelenting as he continued his reign of terror. Night after night, he descended into the depths of his basement chamber, carrying out unspeakable acts of cruelty that fed the darkness within him. The malevolent presence reveled in the pain it caused, its insatiable hunger driving Lucas to new depths of depravity. As the malevolent force within him grew stronger, so did Lucas's ability to create elaborate devices of torment. He meticulously crafted tools that were as diabolical as they were intricate, each designed to inflict the maximum amount of suffering on his victims. The malevolent force seemed to guide his hands, granting him an uncanny knowledge of pain and suffering that defied explanation. The dark web community, drawn by the twisted spectacle he had created, watched in morbid fascination as Lucas's victims suffered. Bidders from all corners of the world vied for the opportunity to determine the fate of his captives, placing their bids for the privilege of choosing the tools and methods of their demise. In this chilling auction of agony, the malevolent force reveled in the attention and adulation it received. The screams of Lucas's victims were like a haunting symphony, a testament to the malevolent power it wielded. The more agony it inflicted, the more powerful it became, its influence extending beyond the confines of the basement and into the world at large. But even as the malevolent force seemed to be in control, a glimmer of resistance continued to grow among the victims. In the depths of their suffering, they found strength in one another, forming a bond that transcended the torment they endured. They communicated in hushed whispers, plotting a way to escape their grim fate and put an end to the malevolent force's reign. As the malevolent force reveled in its sadistic games, it remained unaware of the quiet rebellion brewing beneath the surface. Its arrogance was its downfall, as it failed to recognize the strength of the human spirit, the same spirit that it had sought to break. And as the victims devised a plan to overthrow their captor and the malevolent force that drove him, the stage was set for a final showdown, one that would determine the fate of all involved. In the shadowy depths of the basement, a reckoning was inevitable. The malevolent force's reign of terror had created a cauldron of despair and defiance, a volatile mixture that would soon explode in a clash of wills. The malevolent force's power, once unchallenged, was about to face its greatest adversary, the indomitable spirit of those it had sought to consume.